What's up, everyone? It's Russo. I hope everyone is doing well. Please follow my Instagram at RussoLifts, just in case something happens to this YouTube channel. You can follow, message, and you can watch my daily story content on Instagram. I'll see you there. What's up, everyone? It's Russo. I hope everyone is doing well. Hit you with that ASMR sip. Anyways, going to be going to the topic video of the issues with SARMS plus steroid cycles, hybrid cycles. Now, I love these cycles. These are normally what has been documented on this channel is a little test base plus whatever SARM I'm playing around with. And I personally prefer these over, harsh oral gear cycles with test. I find that I have way less issues revolving around blood pressure, and I just don't feel like my body's taxed. Like, for example, I like a low-dose test base with LGD 4033. I don't feel like shit, and it feels like 70% of what D-ball feels. If I have done, and if I do test plus D-ball, my blood pressure is horrible. It's a 17 alkylated steroid, meaning it's super liver toxic, methylated, and it just comes with a lot more side effects on paper. But there is one caveat with the SARMS hybrid cycles I wanted to go into, and that is the involvement of SHBG, sex hormone binding globulin. So let's just go into the example of you're a peak lifetime natural, and you slacked off a little bit. All the variables weren't in your favor for producing optimum natural testosterone, and you get it back together, right? You get it back together and your natural testosterone starts going up again. Well, the pendulum of your body to combat the raise in natural testosterone is SHBG. So SHBG is short for dyslexia. Keep that in there, Dante. Sex hormone binding globulin. So it's going to bind and transport your free testosterone around. It's a transporter. But more importantly, when sex hormone binding globulin binds with your test, it renders it useless. It cannot go into any tissues, and it's not bioactive. It's not bioavailable until it is unbound from sex hormone binding globulin. So normally what happens on let's say a testosterone-only blast, right? Let's say you're blasting 600 milligrams a week. As the cycle goes on, your body's picking up on all this extra free testosterone, which your body thinks is associated with cardiovascular disease, associated with insulin resistance. So obviously, your body deploys its defense mechanism, aka SHBG. So as the cycle continues, your SHBG is rising, aka binding with the free testosterone, rendering it useless. So that's the combatant way. Now, you can take Proviron, you can do things to lower your SHBG, and you can keep that under control. A big thing with libido issues with guys, and my TRT clinic Elevate Alternative, link in the description, there's the plug. But a big thing with libido is that you can have a high total amount of testosterone, but if you have a low free testosterone, meaning that your SHBG has bound a shit ton of that total testosterone, like if you have 600 total testosterone, but your free testosterone is only 200, the 200 is the only testosterone you're feeling. So SHBG plays a big role in libido, and it's just like a regulator that people don't truly understand. But the caveat with SARMS is that, SHBG recognizes non-bioidentical testosterone. So if I, inject testosterone into my ass, SHBG can still combat that. SARMS, SHBG does not recognize whatsoever. So what happens when you do these hybrid cycles is that the SARM is confusing the SHBG, and the body, for some reason, I've read so much blood work, right? This has been anecdotal blood work that I've collected for a while, and then I've seen in my own blood work. Actually, on my blood work video, I'll have Dante throw up the blood work video.
Oh shit.
Only cycles is.
Check that SHBG out, bro.
So my SHBG is completely crashed. So all 50 of my tests is basically free, right? So there's no sex hormone binding globulin going on. There's no test being bound up useless. We will see next blood draw where that's at. So
one of the fastest ways to bring your SHBG back up, by the way, is HCG monotherapy, like literally coming off of the androgens and using a, well, you could do it a bunch of different ways realistically, but HCG monotherapy is kind of the tried and true way that guys on TRT will fix, fucked up SHBG levels. That can be, like SHBG is a proxy for a lot of things. Some people with insulin resistance, blah, 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 especially PCOS in women. And in androgen using males though, especially at super physiological dosages, and especially those using orals, and especially those using injectable SARMs, your SHBG is probably going to be pretty low, even in lieu of those other factors. So it's something that if you want proper regulation of your testosterone levels and it actually getting delivered to target tissues effectively and in a regulated way, I would recommend trying to keep an eye on it and keeping it in the middle if you can. And it's, potentially difficult if you're obviously blasting all the time, but contrary to popular belief, having crashed SHBG is not necessarily good, despite the fact that all your testosterone essentially is unbound and free to then go build muscle and do whatever. It's not good if your body's just a geyser of fucking hormones that is not being regulated by SHBG whatsoever. So I would definitely recommend keeping an eye on that shit. Because, yeah, it's especially in a hair loss context, it's so problematic that people don't realize is DHT has a 5 times higher binding affinity than test for SHBG. So, people, they see their total test and they see, oh, that's good. I have good free test that my SHBG is low. You also have a dick ton of free DHT that you would otherwise not have if you had a normal SHBG, which is wreaking havoc up here. So if you are prone to hair loss, SHBG should be one of the first things you're looking at.
Yeah, so you referenced that my SHBG was completely crashed in the gutter, single digits. So the SHBG doesn't recognize, it doesn't bind with any of the SARMs. So what happens is when you do these hybrid cycles is if you're using a lot of testosterone, that's all free testosterone because your SHBG is crashed if you have a SARM in there. So yeah, a SARM is a great way to lower SHBG if you have high SHBG or proviron. But if your SHBG is super crashed, that could form insulin resistance as well as horrible acne. So this gets into my example of how I ruin my skin. So I'll throw up the thumbnail video, have Dante throw it up of my horrible acne. I did a video discussing my acne. I'll link it above. But basically that happened with one cycle. And this was back when no one did hybrid cycles. No one was playing around with using testosterone in high dosages and super high binding affinity SARMs like S23. But essentially what happened in this cycle was I was blasting 500 milligrams of testosterone a week with 20 to 40 milligrams of S23 a day. Now, S23 has a higher binding affinity than the testosterone, meaning that no matter what, all the S23 is going to bind to the androgen receptors over the testosterone, which leaves the remaining androgen receptors for the testosterone to bind to. And it also means that it's going to float, like all the tests that's getting booted off the AR from the S23 binding is going to be floating around in my bloodstream, causing higher DHT and estrogen conversions. While the other thing is my SHBG is crashed, right? So there's no regulator going on for all that excess free testosterone that was going on because SHBG doesn't recognize the SARM. Your body just knows that something's binding with the AR, but it doesn't really know what it is. It seems like, again, from the blood work basis of every single SARM cycle blood work I get, SHBG is always in the gutter. So what happened in that cycle was that I had a higher binding affinity SARM. It was binding with all my AR. I was blasting too much testosterone, which left me with a bunch of free testosterone. And then because I had the SARMs in my system, I removed the safety net of SHBG being able to, render some of that free testosterone useless, transport it around. And that left me with all free testosterone, basically, which caused insane amounts of estrogen and DHT conversion and led to a shit ton of androgenic acne. And it ruined my skin within 3 weeks. So what am I trying to nail through your head right here? I'm trying to nail through your head, like, I like hybrid cycles. I no longer utilize 500 milligrams of test a week with any SARM. I normally start at 200 and then work up my way up to 350 milligrams a week if I can tolerate it. And yeah, that's like the perfect balance of like a lot of free testosterone, but not too much free testosterone, because I'm obviously taking into consideration that I have no sex hormone binding globulin going on, and that whatever SARM I pick, it's going to beat the testosterone to the androgen receptor 100% of the time. And I have a lot more androgen receptors built up from my years of cycling right now. But, you know, if you're just starting out, you probably wouldn't have as many androgen receptors, which would leave you with more free testosterone and with no regulator, aka SHBG, to render some of that free testosterone useless, which then leads to insulin resistance, possible water retention from the increase in estrogen, and obviously DHT-based acne, aka, you know, horrible androgenic acne all over your body, and then could also lead to hair loss, male pattern baldness. So basically keep that into consideration. Every single blood work I've seen, SHBG is crashed. And although like most people, you know, be like, oh, you want as much free test as possible, I agree with that to a certain extent, right? I agree with that to a certain extent. I think it gets to a point where you need a little bit of SHBG, and you also have to remember that SHBG moves your testosterone around in the body, right? It's not bioactive when it's bound, but it will unbind later, which could have your testosterone go into different tissues. When there's no SHBG, you know, you could have organ binding, all that stuff you don't want, because testosterone is not selective whatsoever towards muscle and bone. It will be binding with your organs, everything, and you have no transporting system because the SARMs cause the SHBG crash. So I hope you have more insight on how to put together a hybrid cycle. Basically, what I'm getting at is you should keep the test super low and then play around with the SARM dosage. Really, the testosterone should just be there to maintain homeostasis, to have a constant estrogen conversion, and to have a constant androgen level that's stable. And then you should really be playing around with the SARM dosage, getting the benefit out of that versus creeping up the testosterone as you creep up the SARMs. That's a recipe for disaster that I personally experienced firsthand. And it took me years to completely repair my skin. And really the only reason I fully repaired my skin is because, you know, my biohacking knowledge and my research into how to get rid of that much androgenic acne. It was horrible. And I feel like most people would have just blasted Accutane, but I managed to do it without blasting Accutane. I did end up microdosing it a little bit at one point, but it's not fun. And it happened literally within 3 weeks of doing that S23 testosterone blast. So that's some food for thought. Remember, SHBG does not recognize SARMs whatsoever. And all the blood work I've read, and I've read a shit ton of blood work, including my own blood work, has led to an SHBG crash because SHBG cannot bind with a SARM. It cannot render a SARM useless. It doesn't know what a SARM is. It can't transport it. It just knows that, you know, your body just knows that something's binding with the AR and that it's going to start suppressing testosterone. But if you're injecting testosterone, you're obviously taking away that defense mechanism, and then SHBG is going to be crashed, which renders all the testosterone you inject to be free testosterone. So hope you learned something in this video. Please share this channel around, as I believe it is shadow banned. I'm trying to get it popping off again, and drop some likes on this video and check out the description below. I will see you guys in my next video.